I'm here to talk a little bit about last night's Lockdown. Now, although I have not seen Lockdown yet, from what I understand, a lot of people were not happy with it. I mean, despite the fact that TNA had built it up. Um, they say that two of the problems that TNA had last night was the fact that two of the superstars advertised did not show up. One superstar, of course, I can understand, or wrestler, whatever you want to call him, had a legitimate reason. And the other, according to what we found, according to what I've read on various wrestling sites, said that they had no plans on showing up in St. Charles. Basically, the background of St. Louis, if you know what I mean. Basically, in other words, they had no plans of coming there for some. I don't know. And who are those two wrestlers? Well, one is Doug Williams, and the other is Six-Pac Sean Waltman. Now, Doug Williams is the one that has a legitimate reason. Because he lives in the UK, he could not get a flight out because of the flight ban. So he was stuck with the X Division Championship belt in the UK. So what does TNA do? Well, TNA decides that since he couldn't make it, they decided to strip him of the title. Now, I know a lot of people might have that look of what I just had, like, you know, are you kidding me? The guy has a legitimate reason why he's not there. He has a legitimate reason. I mean, if I was TNA, I could have easily said, all right, let's take the escape match out, because even though I know a lot of people like to, or let's take the X Division title. This is what I would have done, honestly, if I was TNA. I would have took the X Division Championship out and added, mind you, Kazarian and Shannon Moore to that escape match and made it a #1 contenders match. Well, kept it a #1 contenders match. And then at Sacrifice, have the winner of the escape match face Doug Williams. That didn't happen. Instead, TNA decides to strip Doug Williams of the title because he couldn't show, because he has a legitimate reason, and thus they decide, okay, we're going to have our escape match, but this guy's going to pull double duty. Whoever wins is going to pull double duty, and they're going to go on to face Shannon Moore and Kazarian. Well, the person that won the escape match was Homicide. He goes on to face Shannon Moore and Kazarian, and Kazarian ends up winning the match and becoming the new X Division champion, except they don't got no X Division title there or championship belt to present him with because Doug Williams hasn't. Now, if I know Vince Russo, and I don't know Vince Russo, but if I know his writing, knowing TNA, they might make a story out of this, where Doug Williams, well, it's kind of like, I wouldn't be surprised if Vince Russo just goes back to his archives and pulls out that old storyline with Shawn Michaels, who was the Intercontinental Champion when he was suspended or something like that, came back with the Intercontinental title and said, hey, look, I'm the Intercontinental Champion. I'm the real deal, not Razor Ramon. I wouldn't be surprised if they pull something like that out of the back. Now, and I'm sorry about that line you just saw there. I've been using this tape over and over again. But now, another situation that people talk about that I read online is the fact that Sean Waltman, who competed the previous night before for Great Lakes Championship Wrestling in Wisconsin, from what I read on numerous wrestling sites, and I'm sure a lot of you read this too, had basically told people he had no plans of showing up in St. Charles. He had no plans of being at the family arena. You know, this kind of reminds me of a situation on that Ultimate Warrior DVD that I have. After the third time that Vince McMahon brought the Ultimate Warrior back, and the Ultimate Warrior did not show for any events, he was suspended. To quote what Jim Ross said there, he said, when your dad or your family member, or when you are taking a friend, well, not to just quote, but paraphrase what he says, when you're taking someone who's a fan of an individual to go see them when they're advertised and they no-show, that's a disrespect and a disservice to the fans. And that's what Sean Waltman did. He gave a disservice to the fans again. Apparently this isn't the first time. But knowing that Sean Waltman's buddy with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, I wouldn't be surprised if his job is going to be saved. But then again, I don't think Kevin Nash is real happy with the fact that he had to pull double duty last night. I mean, Kevin Nash, he was booked to face Eric Young, and that's what he did. He faced him and he beat him. We obviously saw that coming. He did not plan on having to team up with Scott Hall that night and face Team 3D. He did not plan on pulling double duty. I mean, someone like Rob Van Dam, James Storm, Homicide, those guys can pull double duty. They're still young, they still got a lot left in the tank, they can still pull double duty. Guys like Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, they can't do that. But give Kevin Nash credit, he did. But this is not the way to go if I'm Sean Waltman. If I want to be part of a major organization, I give my word to show up at an event, and I'm scheduled at, I show up. I don't make an excuse and say, oh, I wasn't planning on going. Because when you're scheduled, you're scheduled. But that wasn't the only problem they had. A lot of people felt as though this show was being a little bit, there were certain times during the show with certain matches that were just a little bit too cartoonish, if you will. I mean, sure, a lot of people know that TNA is trying to differentiate themselves and make themselves the true alternative of WWE. They know that. But TNA, to some last night, were being a little too cartoonish at times. I mean, for weeks and months, they've been complaining about the fact that Abyss was always saying, I get my power from this Hall of Fame ring Hulk Hogan gave me. Okay, that's understandable for a guy that's being treated like he's nothing, being disrespected, you know, characterized being disrespected, treated like nothing and all that. To have someone like Hulk Hogan give you his Hall of Fame ring, that's basically saying, hey, I believe in you, you can do this, go. That's basically an encouragement. I can understand that. That's an inspirational story. I can understand that. And I can also understand that some feel as though it's being shown a little too cartoonish at times, because how can a ring give you any power? It's not about power, it's about inspiration. Anytime someone wants to look at that, I mean, think about it. How would you feel if Kobe Bryant gave your young son or your young daughter his championship ring? How would you feel if he gave him the championship ring and said, this is yours, every time you look at it, be inspired to do your best. Be inspired to be who you can be and who you know you can be. That's exactly why Abyss wears that ring. It's an inspirational story. Now, to some, it might be, you know, it's a little cartoonish. I can understand that. But that's not the only thing people complained about with last night. The match between AJ and the Pope, the way it ended, to some was a little too cartoonish. I mean, I can understand, I'm sure a lot of fans, including myself, can understand the Pope getting poked in the eye with a fork. We can even understand a thumb to the eye. But a pin? To some, that's, well, yeah, that is a little vicious. But I guess to some, that's a little too cartoonish. Like, oh, he just beat him with a pin. Sword mightier than the pin. Or the pin's mightier than the sword. Bam, styles clash, right? To some, that may have seemed a little ridiculous. But you know what? TNA is trying to differentiate themselves. Give them that. I mean, I know a lot of people have the different opinion about TNA, and I can totally sympathize with that. But here's another thing. One other thing that fans complained about mostly last night is the fact that there was a lot of blood. And this is coming from fans that have been wanting WWE to show blood, and very little by little WWE has been showing blood, but not just as much. And then they complained last night that TNA shows too much blood, just because they want to prove the different alternative to WWE, the more mature, the willing to take risks. You know, that's just hey, that's how TNA, that's how certain wrestling promotions work, okay? I mean, look at Strikeforce. Look at Strikeforce, for example. Strikeforce is basically the TNA of MMA. They are trying to prove that they are a true alternative to UFC. I mean, they're going as far as to having their product shown on national television. Well, UFC is stuck to Spike TV and Versus. But they are willing to go all the way. You get what I'm saying? I mean, they even have, Strikeforce even has women competing in MMA matches. See, what Strikeforce is doing is they want to prove that they're the better product to UFC, or prove they're a better alternative to UFC, because they're willing to not only be shown on Showtime, which of course probably shows a little bit